Hey, everybody, welcome in. Football is here. Training camp is here. I just got back from the first training camp practice for the Houston Texans in 2024. The very first practice. Look, I still even have my wristband on from practice. Very first training camp practice for any NFL team. The Texans are getting started before everybody else. So Christmas is here early, and I'm here for you with our first of what is going to be a daily, at least daily as long as there are practices, practice report for you. My goal with the podcast during training camp is to bring you as much information as possible in as concise and consumable a fashion as possible throughout training camp to get you ready for the upcoming season and get you ready for preseason games and the whole 9 yards. I'm Stefon Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610, and this is the Utopia Training Camp Practice Report. Training Camp Report number 1. And I will say first, a day that it looked like we were going to have an indoor practice because Mother Nature was swirling some nasty gray clouds around NRG Stadium. But this is how we know the Texans are blessed in 2024. Nary a drop of heavy rain fell. A little bit of light drizzle here and there, but not too wet to practice, not too wet to get in a good hour. And I would say an hour and 15 to an hour and 30 minutes worth of work for the Houston Texans. They finished up around 10:30. D'Amico Ryans met with the media after practice, as did C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and Will Anderson. Nick Caserio met with the media prior to the first practice today and gave some of his thoughts. So let's start there. My thoughts on the first practice for Texans training camp here in 2024. The year 2 continuity was something that was very palpable out there today, for me at least, in that it dawned on me as D'Amico Ryans was walking from the building over the bridge down to the practice field as he was arriving, that this is the first time since 2020 that the Texans have returned a head coach from the previous season at training camp. This is the first time since 2020 that we've experienced the Texans training camp with a coach who was the coach the previous year. In 2020, that was Bill O'Brien's last season, and none of you even got to go to those practices because they were that was COVID. They only let like 10 of us come to practice. And then the following year in 2021 was David Culley. Following year in 2022 was Lovie Smith. And then, of course, last year was the first year of D'Amico Ryans. It felt so comforting not only to see D'Amico himself walking out there, but just see a lot of the same faces, the same staff from the year before. This is the first time in nearly half a decade that we're not redoing everything at the beginning of the year. Now, D'Amico Ryans did say in his press conference that you kind of start over every year. You know, every year is a clean slate and you start over. But I think that's more from just everybody kind of starting in a competitive fashion from ground zero. There is no doubt that there is benefit from this being a year where you're not having to worry about the install of offense or defense being brand new to guys. You don't have to worry about your quarterback being a rookie who just spent the previous several months going through the combine and going through interviews. CJ talked about that as well. Like the ability to have a normal offseason leading into this season is huge. But the year 2 continuity was palpable out there, and the feeling that you got from having pretty much the entire staff back from last year, at least among all the guys that are really relevant on the staff, the highly relevant guys, it was great to see. And when I think of year 2 continuity as well, this is year 2 of Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans working together. I thought there were a couple instances in each of their press conferences today that kind of showed how in sync they are, how in lockstep the two of them are, that they're literally kind of speaking the same language. Both of them talked about how the goal of training camp is to get the foundation in place for the upcoming season. They didn't make any promises about what the season was going to look like. They didn't start looking ahead to games yet, anything like that. They both used the word foundation. Even some of the players use that word too, getting the foundation in place. So they clearly are seeing things through a very similar lens as I think they do on a lot of fronts. I thought the other thing, so the foundation part of it, number 2, I love the view that both of them have on rookies and what the potential roles are for rookies. And let's go back to Bill O'Brien when he was here, 2014 through 2020. Bill, at least outwardly, seemed to have a disdain for rookies almost like he would talk about them as if it was silly to think that rookies could possibly contribute. Rookies don't know anything. That's a hotkey that we play on the show all the time. I don't know if that's Bill's true feelings or if it's something he just expressed in press conferences to try to keep the rookies humble. But either way, I think if you talk publicly about people as if they're, they've got no shot at being a contributor or whatever, that with some of them, that's going to seep in. I think that's part of the reason why some rookies didn't develop all that well under Bill O'Brien's watch. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. D'Amico and Nick both look at rookies through a much different lens. Nick said that as far as rookies getting on the field and playing, he doesn't care who plays as long as it's the best guy. And I think we may see that with Kamari Lassiter. He might wind up being the starting cornerback opposite Derek Stingley Jr. D'Amico used the phrase rookies need to be, quote, ready to go. It's time to go is what he said. Man, it's time to go. So both these guys very open to rookies. I think we've seen the very positive talk about Kamari Lassiter and some of the other rookies. I personally, excuse me, I had to clear my throat. I love the way they handle rookies, Nick and D'Amico. So they're in sync on that as well. The other thing that came out of those press conferences was Nick Caserio answered a question about free agency, and are you still looking at some of the big names? There are some fairly big names out there still in free agency, and I love that Nick said we look at it every day, he and D'Amico. They look at it every single day to see who's out there. Are they better than what we have in the building here? What will it cost to get them? Do we have the cap space to do it? Do we have the flexibility to do it? Does it make sense? I think the most important question they ask about any of these guys, free agency or otherwise, is how do they fit our locker room? How do they fit our culture? Are they about the team? That is one thing that I think Nick did a decent job of that, of being able to identify that trait in guy like the team first kind of thing. I think bringing D'Amico in has taken the ability of both of them to find that to another level. D'Amico himself being one of those guys as a player, and I think his ability to kind of sniff that out. Nick having a GM view of it, but I think D'Amico having both a head coach and a former player view of it. I think you look around this roster, you go to any of those practices, and you guys who go to practice starting next Tuesday on the 23rd that go to the public practices are going to see this is a team that really, really enjoys playing football, enjoys playing with each other and for each other, and you're going to see that out there. So that's my first thought today was on the year 2 continuity, because that was something I was feeling even before they took the practice field. The other thing that I think a lot of you are going to be watching for is Stefon Diggs. Any of the new guys. And the new guys all look tremendous. Danielle Hunter looks great. Joe Mixon looks great. Stefon Diggs looks great. I think my biggest takeaway with Stefon Diggs today, though, is that, as we've talked about, when it's gone wrong for Stefon Diggs, it's usually after a couple years somewhere, 2 or 3 years. That's what went wrong in Minnesota. That's what went wrong in Buffalo. We're in year 1, and this may be the only year of Stefon Diggs. His contract is just a 1-year deal, basically. So I will tell you this. Diggs was very affable, playful almost with the media there. They're doing drills, and he's coming over and saying hello. Very few players do that. So he seems to be in great spirits. The biggest thing for me as it pertained to Diggs was that Tank Dell was attached to his hip the entire practice. Where Diggs went, Tank went. And always talking and chopping it up. And Diggs, you could tell, you can watch the body language. We can't hear the conversation. We're 100 feet away. But you can see that Diggs is giving tactical advice to Tank, and whether it's getting in and out of cuts or little subtleties or things like that. Tank is taking big advantage of this opportunity to sit underneath the Stefon Diggs learning tree, and I think it's phenomenal because I think Tank is going to be here for a long, long time. If I had to guess, I think Diggs is going to be here for 1 year, but who knows? He seems to really be liking it. CJ was asked about Diggs. D'Amico was asked about Diggs. Everybody's got glowing words about Stefon Diggs. So that was cool to see. Even Nico in his press conference gushed about Diggs. So that's the big Diggs takeaway from me, is that you can spot his leadership. You can see it in the body language out there and I think it's a big reason they brought him in. I know that Diggs has a reputation that seems to kind of belie that goes the opposite of that. But I know that D'Amico and Nick did plenty of due diligence on what Stefon Diggs is like behind the scenes. And I think so far, so good. I think the other Stefon Diggs takeaway is that he looked good out there in drills. He looked smooth. It's really surreal to see him out there. When you think that this team 2 years ago and what they had at wide receiver and just how this was not a place that a player like Stefon Diggs would want to come play and let alone feel like he could thrive. But D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud have just changed the calculus on what I think people around the league and players around the league on how they see the Texans. So it was pretty surreal to see number one out there, Stefon Diggs, running routes and things like that. And it was, I don't know, pretty scary, I guess, if I'm another coach that's on the Texans schedule this year. So cool to see Diggs. I think there's a Diggs effect going on right now with that wide receiver room, and I think it's a positive one so far. So that's training camp note number 2. The last one, just some general observations from training camp today. I know a lot of you probably have questions about the health of some guys. This is a pretty healthy football team right now. They've got a few guys on the PUP list, 3 to be exact. Probably the most prominent name on there is Andrew Beck. I think D'Angelo Ross is on there as well, and one other player. So 3 guys on the PUP list. Dylan Horton is on the non-football injury list. He's still recovering from cancer last year. And that's in terms of injury or medical stuff, that's about it. Laramie Tunsil did not practice today. He was in workout shirt and shorts working out on the side field with a big heavy wrecking ball and some elastic bands and whatever. D'Amico Ryans was asked about that after practice, and he said some guys are on different schedules. It doesn't sound like Laramie is injured. Of course, he's coming back from knee surgery that he had in the offseason. So he's one of the older guys on the team. They've always kind of handled Laramie with kid gloves a little bit when it comes to the medical stuff if they need to, and veteran players in general. I'm not picking on Laramie Tunsil. But this was a day for Laramie where he was in workout shirt and shorts working out on the side. I would be surprised if he's not in uniform one of these next couple practices on Friday or Saturday, just based on D'Amico Ryans' answer that he's kind of on a certain schedule. But maybe the schedule he's on right now is he's working out for the first few practices. The bottom line is nobody seems alarmed by this. Nobody seems nervous about it. Titus Howard was back on the field in uniform doing things like a starting right tackle would. So that was great to see Titus Howard back out there, because when he suffered that injury last year, I think it was in the Arizona game. It was around that time of year, kind of midway through the year, little past the midway point. And I think there was some conjecture that the severity of the injury might lead to him missing part of training camp. He's doing everything. He looks really good physically. Looks huge. Kenyon Green, still, the reports on Kenyon Green from OTAs and minicamp, and I saw him with my own eyes. He looks tremendous still. He reshaped his body in that year that he took off, and he was doing everything today. Kenyon Green was. So there's even though he had some surgeries and things like that last year, no lag time for Kenyon Green. Like, he's back out there. So I know it's the first training camp practice. So when I say this is a pretty healthy football team, they should be healthy. They haven't played any real football yet, but the norm still is for a lot of teams to have guys on the PUP list because they're repairing injuries from the previous season. The Texans don't have a lot of that going on. As far as drills and things like that, there were no pads, so there was no tackling or hitting going on out there today. They did do some teamwork. They did some 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 out there. As far as noteworthy plays that I saw out there, the very first play from scrimmage in the team part of the drills, C.J. Stroud threw an absolute dart to Tank Dell. Would have been about a 20-yard gain in a game, but put it in a really tight window. Dell went down to the ground to get it, had a guy roll over top of him. I got a little nervous, but Tank Dell popped up, flipped the ball to the referee, and went back to the huddle. That was probably CJ's best play of the day, was the very first play. The very next play, he actually overthrew Nico Collins on a deep route to the back right corner of the end zone, in which Nico had beat Derek Stingley Jr. deep. So Nico got open, but CJ couldn't drop it in the bucket. Conditions weren't, I don't know, they weren't great today. It was a little wet out there, but that's a throw CJ should make, and CJ knew it. He put his hands on his head. That's the universal sign for, God damn it, I fucking threw it over the guy's head. That's the universal sign, is hands on head like that. I don't know if you knew that. It's kind of like the Heimlich maneuver, the universal sign for choking, that sort of thing. So there was an overthrow. Other plays that I saw, there was one play where CJ was in gun, bad snap. I couldn't see who the center was. I'm assuming it was Juice Scruggs because CJ runs with the ones, and Juice Scruggs is the number one center. So we did have a bad snap and shotgun that went over CJ's head. That would have been really bad in a game. Kalen Bullock had a nice PBU, a nice pass breakup in team drills. That was cool to see. Really weird to see a safety with number 41, but that's what Kalen Bullock has. So he made a nice pass breakup where he came up on a kind of an intermediate route and was able to jump the route and knock it away. So that was kind of cool to see as well. So those were some of the plays that we saw. Overall, there wasn't anything I saw out there that was a red flag or something to get alarmed about. This looks like a team that's ready to work. This is a team that looks different than Texan teams from 2 years ago, just talent-wise, physically. They've got some beef there, man. Oh, that's the other thing. Speaking of beef, Will Anderson Jr., holy smokes, that dude put on some good weight. Good weight. I posted a picture on my Twitter timeline at Sean T. Pendergast of Will Anderson. Will Anderson came to his press conference after practice wearing a white tank top, and he is noticeably bigger than he was in his rookie season last year. He said that he felt himself towards the end of the year, he was getting tossed around a lot. He cited that Ravens game, the playoff game. He felt that he just wasn't heavy enough. So he's gone from 248 to 263. So he's put on 15 very noticeable pounds, Will Anderson has. So that's it. That's practice report number one. Very healthy squad. 97% of the squad, it felt like, out there doing practice things today. And the spirits are very, very high over at NRG Stadium. Hopefully they're high for you as well. If you have not done so yet, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. There we go. Oh, it's cool. I can still put those at the bottom of this new graphic that we've got here. You guys like the new graphic? You like the old right here, right there, the little bullet points that we've got on the YouTube stream? Not bad. Yeah, see this whole pointing thing. Anyways, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. I'm going to be back tomorrow. My plan is to have player interviews throughout training camp as well. Today, I did not do one because I wanted to attend D'Amico Ryans and CJ Stroud's press conferences. Those are two pretty important ones. The first one from the head coach and then the one from the quarterback. So expect some bonus episodes of short interviews with some of the players. If you've got a certain player you'd love to hear from, you can go to the email address. This is the best way to correspond with me, is either through my social media at Sean T. Pendergast on Twitter. You can DM me there. My DMs are open. Or you can email me, houmailbag@gmail.com, if you've got certain players that you're hoping to hear from. Give me some reasons why, though, because if it is something that I agree, like, oh, that would make for a good conversation, then I'm happy to go make the request to do it. houmailbag@gmail.com. So one practice report in the books, many, many more to come. The next one will be tomorrow afternoon, on Friday afternoon. So until then, big thanks to Anthony Irwin, my producer, for getting this podcast out to each and every one of you. And big thanks to all of you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with practice report number 2 live here in Houston, covering the Houston Texans. I'm Sean Pendergast. Have a great day, everybody.